almost feel like the best way to figure out the answers to some of the questions that we ask would be to just fucking experience it.
Well, except for that particular question is not something that you could not share it. You can never accept through the guise. Well, you could share it through a guise, through a ruse, which is exactly what's happening here. The only way you could pretend to share it, you could explore you could get as close to sharing it as you possibly could, but you could never actually share anything.
But you don't need to share an experience with another human being.
You don't.
To know what...
Right.
What
You wouldn't have the need to share the experience of being all that is. Mm-hmm. There would be no need or reward. You wouldn't even think to share all...
You physically couldn't. You couldn't say the words.
You couldn't say that, and you wouldn't even have any reason. In fact, the experience of being all that is must be a completely quantitative less experience. There would be no qualities, there would be no way, there would be no need to describe anything. It must be an experience that is so at the core of everything that you can't give it a quality. There's no quality you can ascribe to existence other than
that it exists.
Existence, right? And what that experience is like, I would imagine feels probably pretty like you wouldn't worry about anything, right? I'm all that is, and I think I'm gonna actually stop this part here. I don't know what's going on there. Oh, I guess I don't really have to, although that it'll like trailer in. Oh yeah, that's what's happening there. So held a message for reason profanity. Auto mod allowed to post, allowed deny. Jared, get your dumbass some goddamn green tea.
I just had some Earl Grey.
C386.
That's Connor. He's watching your stream
right now.
Is he?
Why would he be watching my stream right now? I even put
that's
up
That
is him. Yeah.
Okay.
So
chatted.
So C3. I know it's kind of weird to me that I just started streaming and somebody's saying anything. Although I haven't heard anything. I'm gonna turn off this repeat monitor thing here in a moment. I'm just checking the volumes. We've got Jared in the house, and we're dabbling with this idea of this talk show, which I have chosen to name Focus and Momentum, and we are talking about everything pretty much, but right now we're talking specifically about...
Well, before we were talking about trying to fucking travel faster than the fucking speed of light.
Right,
That's what
like
I'm gonna do.
how is it exactly that... Because apparently, according to Jared, at any rate, although I haven't done any research into this, scientists have observed galaxies moving at faster than the speed of light. They're moving away from us faster than the speed of light. And I understand how they would calculate this, but I don't. I think I do.
I have not personally calculated it.
Well, I don't even understand.
I only understand the process by which the calculation is done.
Well, you take two measurements and you can figure out how fast something has traveled over how fast it is. It's always seemed to me that green tea, huh? I don't know why. Why would he need green tea? Let's see.
It's an inside joke.
Oh, it's an inside joke. One of those, huh? Yeah, I mean, it seems obvious to me that things can go faster than the speed of light if that is a quantifiable speed, right? I mean, if you can say something moves at 10, then obviously something can move at 11. The only way you could say you can't go faster than that is if it's infinite. This moves at infinite speed. You can't move faster than... That would be like saying that it's possible to move faster than yourself. You can't move faster than you, right? You can't get ahead of yourself. Which is like...
Well, if you actually, at least according to Einstein, according to his field equations, once you get to 90%, the faster you get, the faster you move through space, the more time dilation occurs. So once you get up to like 99.9% the speed of light, if you traveled from Earth at 99.9% the speed of light, and you were 5 years old.
Right.
So send someone in a spaceship at 5 years old.
Right.
And you have another twin on Earth who's 5 years old. When you get back to Earth, if you send him up there for 50 years on Earth,
Right.
the twin on Earth would have aged to 55 years of age.
Right.
But the person who gets back in the spaceship that was traveling at 99% the speed of light has only aged like 5 days, if that. Depends on how fast you go at the speed of light.
Right. So basically you're saying the faster you get toward the speed of light, the more time slows. Relative time, so time of people that are experiencing time in the Earth time frame, the closer you get to traveling at the speed of light, the slower time moves for you.
But then the equation...
That's what you were just saying, right?
Yes.
So according to Einstein's equation...
That's what I'm saying.
According to Einstein's equation, the faster you get, the closer you get to the speed of light, the
slower
slower you
seems.
experience time.
Yes.
Which is
for
an
you,
interesting
for an
thing,
observer.
because I was kind of thinking about, like, you know how time slows down, or your perception of time kind of
time
gets
dilation.
slower and slower. I would imagine that in the experience of experiencing yourself as all that is, it would be a completely timeless experience.
So this is...
Right?
So when... This is where the equation gets funny.
I'm just looking for a little bit of background music here.
When you put the equation in at 100% the speed of light, if you're an observer, if you're a photon,
Right.
if you are a photonic observer traveling at the speed of light, time feels so slowed down that the instant you are ejected...
Okay, wait, you're going to have to repeat that. I missed something there. So, say you're an observer.
Traveling at the speed of light.
Traveling.
100%.
You are you're traveling at the speed of light, and you're observing what?
This is what the equation basically says, that if you're traveling at the speed of light, when you are emitted, you observe where you land at the same moment. So if you're a photon traveling from the sun and you're observing that, you experience
No, wait,
as an
if
observer.
you're the photon.
If you're the photon.
If you're
so
the
if
photon.
you are traveling at the speed
So
of
if you
light.
are light, which I've often said, the only way to
Yes,
travel
yeah, I
faster
know,
is to
you
become
said that.
light, right?
If
Anyways.
you are light,
If you are
then
light.
if you are observing it, you experience getting ejected from the sun, and at the same moment you experience getting ejected from the sun, you also experience colliding into the earth. If you are the photon that's traveling towards the earth. That's how time dilation steps up when you get to 100% speed of light. As though there was no
time.
travel time.
There was no time.
As though you didn't
travel
move from
at all.
point A to point B.
So you're saying from a subjective place as the photon, you would have not experienced any time.
any movement, any change in position, any time.
Any change in, well, you would experience change in position, but you would not experience,
change in time.
which how could you actually experience a change of any kind without time?
It's almost as though you get to the speed of light, and it's like what Bashar says. You are simply
Feel
here
free to join in or ask
then you are
questions, etc.,
simply
etc.,
there.
etc.
without
Right.
stepping on all the points
Right.
in between.
Right. So then that would mean it's possible to move through space without time. So that would
But for
ascribe
an
to space
observer
equality
that's not traveling at the speed of light, time is required for them
to observe.
to observe you.
In fact, it's
But for you, as the
well, time would be required to observe any movement because movement
which means that for
insinuates
you
time.
to actually observe that you've gone
you can't be moving
from
at
there to there, you have to slow down.
You have to slow down.
You have to.
To observe any movement whatsoever, you have to slow down.
And I just figured out a science fiction way to do that. You know? So say you find a way to make matter move at the speed of light. You know? So to the observer, traveling at the speed of light, they go here, there. So, you know, they start at Earth and then they're at Alpha Centauri. So here's
Right.
how you do it. Here's how you slow it down. At a certain point, you maybe run it through a computer or whatever, you can do whatever the fuck you want in science fiction. At a certain point, a basin of water is placed in front of the spacecraft somehow. Or
Oh,
you
you're
aim it
actually
at
gonna use
water.
the water. Oh,
Or
so
you
or
aim it
through
at
water.
water. Because when light...
Oh, what if you went through a whole watery planet? You actually used the water and you went through just enough of the water. You actually plotted your course so that you actually used a planet's like imagine a Jupiter-sized planet, and you were just so good at this that you're like, well, we're gonna use the water world of to slow down. We're gonna go right through. We're not gonna hit the core, almost like ricocheting or a gravity assist, but actually go through the water. Yeah. Anyways, if you made a basin of water somehow, then you could slow.
Because as light travels, as it changes medium, it slows down. So when light travels through water, it travels at 75% the speed of light. This is how we've observed things traveling faster than...
Well, that's actually because
a
the
minute.
only reason that that's traveling faster than the speed of light is because you're actually slowing down light,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And you can slow down
also
light further.
means the speed of light is not a constant. How could you slow down
The speed of light through a vacuum.
through
That's
a vacuum?
what the cosmological
So
constant
the
is
cosmological
supposed to be.
constant has to do with the speed of light with a vacuum. However, there's no such thing as a vacuum.
Through a vacuum, as in
There you can get close.
air, there's no glass, there's no
I
water.
understand,
There's
but a
nothing
vacuum.
in the way. 100%.
Well, there's no air, but
the
there's
speed of
stuff.
light.
There's stuff in the way
As
though.
fast
You have like a
as you
hydrogen
can go.
atom every meter or so. There's like one hydrogen atom per meter of space in space, like deep space. Of course, there's all kinds of other stuff. There's dust.
But you
there's
can make a
particulate.
perfect vacuum.
You can make a perfect vacuum. That is
Scientists
the
have made perfect
vacuums. Perfect vacuum. So there's nothing inside at all. How do you do that?
Actually, technically,
How do
that's
you do
not
that?
true. There is something in there. There is something in there. It's just that it doesn't interact with any fucking thing that we know of at all. And that is the neutrino. Neutrinos are emitted all the time. They're emitted in supernovas.
Neutrinos are emitted all the time, and neutrinos apparently can exist in a perfect vacuum.
They can exist in anything. They travel. So imagine for a minute you had a particle of radiation. All right. Now,
A light. Radiation is just light, some kind of photon.
okay,
No, radiation doesn't have to be I guess it could be, no, because there's X-rays, there's
I
Radiation.
mean like a particle of radioactive material.
a particle of radioactive material. We
Like
do need...
fallout.
Alright, fallout.
Okay, if you want to stop radioactive material from getting to you to harm you,
Uh-huh.
you need at least 1 foot of something in between you and the particle traveling towards you.
Okay.
And the best thing to do it is lead, because when things are radioactive, they naturally want to break down and break apart until they get to lead, because lead is stable and it stays lead.
Uh-huh.
So if you get a foot of lead, it will stop anything. About anything that a human being can concoct today in the 21st century and shoot at about a foot of lead, it will stop it.
Right.
It will not go through that foot of lead.
Right.
Now imagine, instead of a foot of lead, you get a light year of lead. That's like a trillion miles of lead. Okay, that's a lot of lead, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take a neutrino, and that neutrino will pass through all that lead at the speed of light as though it was...
So
breath
now, is a
through air.
neutrino the only thing that exhibits this behavior that you are aware of, or that
I'm
science is aware of, as far as you know?
It just doesn't fucking interact with matter at all.
So...
Not at all. It does interact with matter on very rare occasions, and they're emitted all the time. 65 billion neutrinos are estimated to pass through yours and my body every single second.
Right, so these are neutrinos, and they're just like background radiation. Where do these neutrinos...
Particles that come
from-
from nuclear fusion reactions.
So what is the difference between a particle and an atom? Well, atoms are made up of particles, right?
Yeah.
Or are they? So like
Yeah,
your,
atoms
your,
are made up of
your
particles.
protons and your electrons would be called particles.
But
So
they're
those are
actually not elementary particles. So there's particles and there's elementary particles. For the longest time, we thought,
Hey! Hello, whoever that is. Thank you for the follow.
cool.
Let's see. It's red Nexellus?
I don't even know that.
I'm going to try to do a better job of that so I don't butcher it too horribly, but let me go to theater mode here. And then get this thing out of the way so this all disappears. Yeah, let's see. Red Naxxle 1590? Red Naxxle 1590. You can correct me if I'm butchering that.
Red and Axel.
Yeah, but
except
there's an N there too.
I know.
So,
Red and Axel.
Red and Axel. Red and Axel. I like that. Red
That's like
and
a
Axel.
cartoon name right there.
Right.
Red and
Almost
Axel.
like Rhett what's his name?
Rhett and Link. Yeah.
Rhett and Link. Yeah.
That's a cool name.
Yeah, it is a good name. Red and Axel 1590. Thanks for the follow. We're just sitting here having some conversations about the expansion of the universe, the properties of light, how something can move faster than the speed of light, which apparently we've measured galaxies moving away from us at faster than the speed of light. How is that happening? We're also having some interesting conversation about space and what space is exactly, and we're talking about space-time, just these things that...
Just these basic fucking
Just these
fundamental
basic
facts of the universe.
The most
easy.
fundamental stuff. We're getting real simple here. It might sound complex, but we're actually getting to the simplest stuff that there is.
It's actually not that
to get to. Okay, so we're talking about neutrinos right now, because neutrinos are apparently these things that don't interact with
any fucking matter. They just
any
ignore
matter.
it.
They just ignore
They
matter.
practically ignore it.
Well, most elementary particles do ignore matter, though, don't they? I mean, light can't pass through matter. Well, at least not visible light. Visible light doesn't pass through matter.
Infrared light.
Infrared, X-rays go through. Microwaves pass through matter, obviously.
Not all matter. You get 10 feet of lead. Microwaves ain't going.
Or even a foot.
Or even a foot, probably.
Or even like the size of the thickness of a microwave oven wall.
Yeah.
Okay. Alright. So you can't pass microwaves, but there's gotta be stuff that's other than neutrinos that passes through, like elementary particles that pass through. Atoms are clearly passing through us all the time, right?
I mean,
like,
not particularly. Like, there's a reason that, like, oxygen from the air doesn't
get into
my skin.
Except through your nose and your
Except
mouth.
through my nose and mouth, Like,
yeah.
those little oxygens, they don't get in
They
there.
don't get in. The skin is like, oxygen. Give me
We
a
don't need that.
Only, now if you're a neutrino, come on through. You get a free pass. But everything else, you're right.
It's more like
I am
interested.
I'm interested, though, because I'm thinking there are a lot of almost invisible particles that seem like they would pass through. Oh, what about when we get down to the quantum level? We haven't really talked about
there's
the quantum
quantum tunneling, first of all.
Quantum tunneling.
And quantum tunneling is basically just like, hey, you thought you knew the laws of physics? No, you don't. So basically quantum tunneling states that even in a fucking container that nothing can get through, you could have a fucking electron or a particle or an atom that just decides
to appear
fucking
there?
appear on the other side of the goddamn container.
Right.
And tunnel through.
Well, actually, in quantum physics, I guess they don't even need to tunnel, right? They just blink off.
They just fucking appear on the other side.
They just appear. They
You just call it tunneling.
right.
Because to us, we think, oh yeah, it goes through the... When in reality, it just appears on the other side. And we're just like... And in fact, without quantum tunneling at the quantum level, there would be no nuclear fusion in the sun.
Without quantum tunneling at the quantum level, of course, there would be no nuclear fusion.
Actually, there might be nuclear fusion, but it would not be as prevalent as it can be in the universe today. And this is because the electron barrier of atoms is very strong. When electrons contact each other, they want to push away. They are both negatively charged, so whenever you touch anything, you're really feeling the electron barrier pushing against the electron barrier of your own atoms, and you're never really feeling the atoms, like the nuclei of the atoms anyway.
Right.
So when you've got two hydrogen atoms that are, dealing with the intense pressures and gravity of all this mass of a fucking star, they really don't want to get past that electron barrier. The electrons want to repel. However, because of quantum tunneling, sometimes, occasionally, a particle like the proton or like an electron will just appear. It'll just go from A to B on the other side of the electron barrier, and then boom, 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 nuclear fusion starts taking place. These atoms collide, more nuclear fusion takes place because there's all this energy being released and it drives the reaction forward. Much of the nuclear fusion that comes from our sun, as well as many other stars, actually is the result, or partially the result, of quantum tunneling. Because these particles don't want to touch. They don't want to get to each other.
Right.
But sometimes, when the universe aligns just right, there's a particle that says, boop, and then you've got nuclear fusion. It basically
Well, we know
says,
that it doesn't just happen, though, because, well, we don't know, but we can guess.
We can infer that there
We
must
can
be
infer
a reason
There's
for
some
it.
sort of, at least reason, and you know what? I go a little bit further than just reason for it, or some cause of it, other than an intentional, conscious, some sort of intention.
The electrons just like, yo, it looks pretty cool in that nucleus over there.
There's got to be some kind of, and I don't mean there must be some sort of intentionality, right? I mean, because, well, first of all, there must be intentionality behind everything. Okay, this is a big statement. That's a big statement. There almost must be, because it's almost like you can't have it both ways. Either you live in an intentional universe that is the result of intention of some kind,
or you live in a random universe.
Or you live in a random universe, which includes, and you can't have even the slightest little bit of either one in the other. You can't have a completely random universe that's one of the tenets of that universe or experience or reality, and have intention. You can't.
But we know that things within the universe, within our universe, clearly have intention.
Right.
Like,
That's why I was pausing. That's why I was
intention.
pausing, because I wasn't actually sure. I was feeling like it's pretty obvious that you can't have intention and random, or maybe you. I don't see how it's possible that you can have randomness of any kind, even if it's not intentional. You can't do random. Everything that proceeds because of something that preceded it.
Like, even those
procession
random
comes out of
number
precession.
generators within your computer aren't technically random.
Right.
Like, you could technically calculate that when you run these programs and calculations, that there's a probability that this is going to happen and this is going to happen, and based on the transistors within your computer, through observation and calculation of their position, you could easily calculate this is what number the random number generator is going to give you, and it would. So it's not really random, it's just a bunch of transistors firing in a seemingly random way, but there is a reason that it gives you that number.
It could be something as slight as it was 0.00775 degrees Celsius cooler on the left side of your graphics card than on the right side, and so you got a 7 instead of a 97, because that difference in heat actually changes the electrical flow of that calculation, because it's a calculation that's happening in a processor, and
Could be the tiniest
little thing, but it's there. There's something that happened that caused that number to be 7, or caused that number to be 97. Yeah, so, faster than light. Neutrinos, non-reactive. What else are they good for? We've been here before.
You tell me.
What are the noble gases? Nothing out there but what? And noble gases. And even if you do find it, you'll never be published. You'll never be taken serious by the scientific community. It's my life. So what? It's my life. That would be a throwback from Contact, of course.
It's a fucking good
which
movie.
is like the best movie ever.
Yeah, it really is.
It really,
But,
really.
you talk about a
okay.
good fucking movie.
You want a
director.
good movie? Contact is a really good movie. Although somebody mentioned to me, actually, it was Oira that I
Oira?
played
Yeah, I know.
some Guild Wars 2 with. That movie about the Arrival, right?
Mm.
I didn't. Did you see that?
I saw it.
I didn't watch it, and the reason I didn't watch it, as I explained to her, was because based on the trailers and stuff, it looked like another. Oh, they're
Cheesy
either gonna invade us and conquer us because they're gonna dominate us. A higher advanced civilization would clearly only want to dominate and destroy.
It is.
Which, now that I think about it, no.
It's fucking dumb.
That's completely
like-
stupid. The sign of a higher, more intelligent, advanced civilization would be working together with other intelligent beings to
There's very little reason that such an aggressive species would even develop interstellar space
Right.
flight before they fucking killed themselves.
before they right, which is what's her name said, right? Or no, when she was talking to her dad in the book.
in the book context.
Right, he's like, well, we don't really need to worry about overly aggressive species because they kill themselves for us.
It's like you'd be surprised at how rare it is that such tyrants and empires actually get to the step of interplanetary space flight.
Right.
Much less interstellar.
Right, Interstellar. That's a whole nother big. That's a leap that's too far. You know, if you can't even if you're fighting yourselves. Well, it's like we were talking about Normandy, and you're trying to storm the beach, and you're doing all this in these boxes of water, and there are people firing 50mm guns at you. If you're fighting and trying to get off the surface of the Earth, people are attacking you while you're trying to get off in your rocket. That makes it harder. That makes it a lot
How
harder.
many casualties are added on because I want to do scientific progress, but I kind of can't because the rest of the world wants to fuck me up if I try to make
Right.
scientific progress.
Right. Well, you know what I like the best about all of the ideas as far as, technological destruction versus we make it and we become an interstellar civilization, etc. I really, really, really appreciate the choosing your own reality part.
Yeah.
Like where there are these infinite realities according to Bashar, and you get to decide which one you step in because you decide you step into the one where, hey, people stopped killing each other and decided to work together, and they became an interplanetary, interstellar society as a result. You can go that way if you want. It doesn't mean that there wasn't a whole nother Earth that destroyed itself.
It doesn't mean there wasn't a whole nother Earth that is no longer a whole nother Earth. But
Right. It used to be Earth, and then it transitioned.
it used to be Earth, and now it's a beautiful clump of unstable elementary radioactive particles and fallout. And hey, look, it's a little bit of iron right there.
There's a little bit of iron, right? Like when you're a kid and you see it in the sand and you can pick it up with a magnet. I don't know if you've ever done that.
Yes.
And it looks like little hair,
Yeah.
almost like a little furry otter or something, or
Tiny little iron filings.
right filings on a magnet. Yeah, you can just go to a sandy part and rub magnets, and they get all. It's a neat. You've probably done it.
Dude, you can scale that up. I suppose
You can scale everything up,
Yes,
right? Everything
yes.
can be scaled up, right?
You get
As-
a big magnet, you go across the sand, all of a sudden you've got a ton of iron. You throw that shit into a crucible and let's make some stuff now, you know? Like, we got melted iron.
Right. It's really interesting. You can scale everything up, and clearly, if you can scale anything up, you can scale it
Down.
down. And the questions on both ends are kind of similar. Like, how far can you go? Right? Eventually, shit gets small at the quantum level.
Right.
Then shit starts getting like you've gotten pretty far here,
Well-
buddy. Things are starting to break down, and you're like, reality's like. They
Things
should have
get
sent
weird.
a poet, right? That kind of-
Yeah.
right. Things start getting weird when you get small, but why wouldn't they also get weird when you start getting really
They
fucking
probably
big?
do.
Like really fucking like that that was a whole
You
maybe
get
the
a
whole
fucking
bubble.
galaxy.
There's
you're
a
like,
bubble on the other side of this. Like you were talking about. There's one reality with a bubble right at the edge, and then it's like, oh. Give him enough time, right?
Yeah. Give them enough time.
Give them enough time.
They'll figure it out.
How long do you think they'll ever figure it out? Right.
Now, when you get down to the quantum level, so you break something down, you get a big bundle of matter with all these hundreds of quadrillions of atoms. Grab a single atom, say hydrogen. Okay, now let's say helium, because it has all the bells and whistles. So you got protons, you got neutrons, and you got electrons. Okay, now I am not researched enough to explain to you what a lepton is.
I don't know what a lepton is, other than that they just keep coming up with new names for all these new fucking particles that they find.
Things, but they make up electrons. So you can break an electron.
You can actually
down
break
into
an electron into smaller pieces. I'm just looking at my times there.
Okay.
611. Okay. So you can actually, so now we've brought in that you can break down an electron into even something small. You can actually split an electron.
Yes.
That's what you're saying. So like smashing an atom would be you smash whatever the atom is and it comes into.
You got a proton, then you got a neutron, then you got an electron, but then you can take it further. So the electrons are made up of leptons, and I'm not researched enough to explain to you what a lepton is, but
go ahead.
I don't know. I'm telling you,
No,
I'm not researched enough to know how they figured that out.
I know.
But I do know a little bit about what a proton is made up of.
Okay.
A proton can be broken down into quarks.
Right, okay,
So
alright.
there's 6 different quarks. There's up quarks, down quarks, left quarks, right quarks.
They're just like, let's try to keep this simple, ladies and gentlemen. Alright, we don't need magnesicum and China lepton or quark. We're just gonna go with there's up, there's down, there's left, right. Let's use, and then after up, down, left, right, let me see if I can think of what would you do? There's 6. After you go up, down, left, right, where do you go? You go. I don't know. What are the other? What are the other 2?
There's one.
Oh, you don't. Didn't you say
So there's 3
2?
categories, and in each of those 3 categories, you have. In each category of the 3 categories of quarks, you have 2 kinds of quarks. So you have 6 different kinds of quarks in total.
So what are
quarks.
the categories first of all? Then I guess.
I want to make sure.
Yeah, I was
I'm not
actually gonna
botch.
look up what is a lepton there. I was just gonna look that up, but then I decided not to because
There's something really interesting
because I really
that
wanted
I'm
to deal
getting
with
at.
the next. That's why
With
I was like
quarks.
quarks, right,
There are
and leptons.
Okay, cool. That's it. So, actually, there might be names for the categories of quarks, but they have 3 categories: 1, 2, and 3. So there's 3 categories, and in the first category, it's up and down. In the second category, it is top and bottom.
What's the difference between up and down and top and bottom? That sounds almost
There's
like
not
saying
one.
the same.
Other scientists call it left and right. So you've got top and bottom or left and right.
Okay.
So it's the same fucking.
Right.
They're describing the same kind of quark, but
Right.
some people decided to say top and bottom and up and down, and some people decided to say up and down and then left and right. We're gonna go with left and right because that makes fucking sense.
All right, that makes sense. Right.
So you got up and down, left and right.
If
and
you're
then-
just joining us, welcome to the Infinite Wave. This is Focus and Momentum, a new talk show. Something I've been thinking about starting for right now, and I'm having a conversation with Jared here. We're talking about. He's telling me a little
talking
bit.
about quantum mechanics.
We're talking about quantum mechanics right now. We're discussing quantum mechanics, and he's teaching me a little bit about quarks in particular,
Quarks.
because that's the direction we're
I
going
don't
with.
fucking know anything
Right.
about leptons other than the fact that they make
Well,
up electrons.
Right, so you know that leptons are a constituent of electrons, and now I do too. I've heard the word lepton, but I didn't know that was. And then you've got quarks, which are a component of protons.
Yeah.
And there are apparently 3 different.
You need 3 quarks to make 1 proton.
You need
So you
3
need
quarks.
6, really.
6
You need
quarks.
6 quarks in total to make.
But every quark actually is part of. Oh no, it's a part of 3 different groups.
Yeah, so there's 3
How's
different
there 3?
groups of.
We didn't get to the third one because it was up, down,
Yeah,
left,
so
right,
it's
and
up,
what?
down, left, right, and then the third one they call charm and strange.
Charm and
a
strange.
fucking
This is
weird
like
jump,
a fucking
isn't it?
League of Legends skill. Charm and oh my god, we go from simple up, down, left, right.
Oh, so this other quantum physicist, just told us
Quarks are
quirks and
components of neutrons also.
So we've got some
Alright.
people that are quantum savvy.
Alright. Well, at least a little bit, at least enough to know that quarks are components of neutrons also, which that's interesting because the neutron is that's the one you were telling me combines, like in the example of oxygen and hydrogen making water. The neutron is the one that prevented those two protons that are positively charged from
Repelling
repelling
away from each other.
So the
You
neutrons,
need neutrons to make a stable
you
nucleus.
need neutrons. So there's quarks in those things that have no reactivity. So quarks, apparently a part of quarks is that they don't have.
Well, you get a certain quantity of quarks together in a certain formation, and it creates proton with a positive charge. Okay? So if you could take apart a proton, I don't know if it's been done. It might have been done. Particle accelerator might have done it.
Right.
But if you can take apart a proton...
Let me just
you
call
can
CERN
get-
right quick. Let me call my contact at
Yeah.
CERN.
Yo, but...
Hey, Jimmy, I know
Yo,
you're
Tyson, I need some connects.
I know you're busy over there in CERN, but have you guys busted a cork yet? I mean, come on, you've had plenty of time.
Yeah. You're
Really.
getting millions of dollars for this.
Right.
My house's solar farm is going to that.
We know that you've changed the name of Home Depot to the Home Depot, and you fucked with the Bernstein Bears and all
Okay,
that.
let me.
But
let
have
me,
you?
let me-
Anyhow, go ahead.
Let me not get too off
Continue.
track.
Not too off track. Go ahead.
So if you can take apart a quark, you get the three different categories of quarks. You grab one of those pairs of quarks.
Right.
You have up and down, say.
Mhm.
If you try to take apart those quarks further,
Mhm.
so if you try to separate a pair of quarks,
Mhm.
it is really hard.
It's really hard.
So-
right.
It's so hard, in fact, that when you eventually, as far as we know so far, you can't take apart a quark, that's what I thought, but if you could try to pull apart a quark, you would have to expend so much energy into tearing apart a pair of quarks that actually at the moment of separation of that pair of quarks, you would actually create two more quarks. So it's like when you've got one pair of quarks, you separate them, and at the point of separation,
You have 4.
you have four quarks. Because that's how much energy is required, theoretically, to tear apart a quark.
So wait, it almost sounds to me like what you're saying though, and this is a theoretical idea we have because so far we haven't been able to take apart quarks. But how do you know if we haven't been able to do it? This is the first question I have. What gives you this idea that because such a tremendous amount of energy would be invested, is what it sounds like, instead of expended? Because if you end up with 4 where you started with 2, clearly that energy has produced something. It took a lot of energy.
That's how much
but you've
energy is
created.
required to tear apart a pair of quarks. It's so much energy that it's enough mass times the cosmological constant squared that it is another quark. It has to be enough energy to create a whole new quark. A whole new pair of quarks, really, because you tear apart one pair, you get 4 quarks. That's 2 whole quarks. That's
I don't see how more energy. I don't see where you're getting the idea that if you provided an infinite amount of energy, why you're translating more energy
I'm
into
saying
producing
that the bond between 2 quarks
is so strong.
is so powerful
Right.
that to break that bond,
Right.
you have to impart enough energy, a quantity of energy that is so great
Right.
that it would create 2 more new quarks.
How are you getting? Because like that much energy to destroy the bond almost seems like a destructive force. It would destroy things. It would break the bond. So how are you creating? How are you
The amount of
inferring-
energy required to break those 2 bonds is enough energy out of whatever source, whatever machine you're using to split these quarks apart, is using so much energy that it would create 2 new quarks.
I'm not following. I don't see why you're inferring that it would create 2 new quarks. Why wouldn't it just destroy them? Or even if it separated them, where are you getting this idea that it would create 2 new quarks? You're saying that a lot of energy equals creation, essentially.
I know that there is a calculation that can be done to figure this out. I heard it in a science classroom. They could be wrong.
So
So I'm saying what I believe
so
to be
someone
true.
has calculated that with a calculation they've extrapolated that new quarks, a new set of quarks would be produced if you put in enough energy to
actually break that
to break them apart. That
which we have not done.
we haven't done. I'm just thinking that so something in the math suggests that if you invested that amount of energy, you would
Yes.
actually produce
A whole new
quark. Well, another
Two.
pair of quarks. That's an interesting jump to me that you invest that much. Although when you say make a baby, right?
The energy provided to break the quarks can produce matter, which is the same thing that I'm saying.
Oh, I see. So if you get enough energy, eventually you get matter. If you put
Yeah.
enough energy into something,
E
you
equals
eventually
mc squared.
Right,
For mass
right,
to be
right,
a
right,
thing,
right.
create matter. Matter and mass go hand in hand.
So basically, what you're saying is, after you get enough mass together, it becomes.
A quark.
Enough energy together, it becomes mass.
Yes.
Somehow or another,
It becomes
if
enough mass.
if
that
enough
it becomes
energy
matter.
accumulates, it turns into matter.
Yes.
So
And
this
that's
energy
true
can
with
everything.
You don't even have to be
Right.
worrying about a quark
Quarks
to do
or
that.
anything. Right. So basically, I'm wondering about different ways. We have created matter from light and electric fields, so we assume the same would happen in this case. From light and electric fields, huh? Light and electric
So by imparting
fields.
energy with electromagnetic radiation,
Right.
we've made photons matter. We've proved photons to be channeled in such a way that you can have mass in a photon and it can interact with physical matter like matter,
Right.
because it is matter at
Right.
that point, basically.
So
the same
actually, it
thing
sounds
we
more
would
like you're
infer would
directing.
happen. It's a hypothesis. It's
Right.
not a proven thing that you would make two quarks.
Right.
We just
Right.
infer that
You're
it would
saying that
happen.
because we know if you get enough energy together, you tend to produce matter of some kind. It's likely that the matter that you would most likely produce, this is the inference, would be
Yes.
another couple of quarks.
It's not just a guess.
Right.
There is
It's not a guess. It's
thought
an
and-
educated guess.
It's a hypothesis.
It's an is that your word for educated guess? Hypothesis. Is that what the word
well, a
hypothesis?
hypothesis states that if you do, it's an explanation. A hypothesis is an explanation. If you do something, then this thing will happen. That's what a hypothesis is. So if you impart enough
Yeah, but
energy
that's
to separate a
That's
quark,
different than an educated guess. So it's not an educated guess.
It's a
Because a
hypothesis.
hypothesis says if then, like this is going to happen. But hypothesis doesn't seem to carry the connotation of if then. Like a hypothesis almost seems like so the thing that doesn't carry the weight in a hypothesis is we think seriously that if this happens, then this will
Yeah,
happen.
so you can hypothesize about all kinds of stuff. You can
Right.
say, if I bang two rocks together, then I will produce a spark,
Right.
assuming that the rocks are conchoidally fractured. And a hypothesis doesn't mean that it's true. A hypothesis is just an explanation. You could
Right.
say, if I take off my
Well,
shoe,
it's not an
then a
explanation.
unicorn
It's not an
will come out of my shoe.
Right. It's a projection. It's not an explanation for what has happened. It's a prediction of what will happen.
If you do something, yes.
Right.
If an action
So a
is
hypothesis
taken.
is more predictive than explanatory.
Kind of, but it's also an explanation. It says, if I do this, then this will happen. Although, no,
But that
it's
means-
not really an
no,
explanation
because you
it
can't
doesn't
use
say why that will happen. It just says,
And
this
it's not
will
even
happen.
sure that it will happen.
Yeah, so a hypothesis is the first step to the scientific, not the first step. The first step is really asking a question, like, why does this happen?
Right.
And then you state a hypothesis as to why, what you think will happen if you do something,
Which
and then
is-
you test the hypothesis.
Right. Which so a hypothesis is a prediction then, and then I guess once you test a hypothesis, and I realize we're going into another area, but hey, we're talking science here, and who doesn't want a primer, a refresher course on hypotheses? On hypotheses. Excuse me, that's when there's more than one, I guess, right? We wanna keep our hypothesis, which would be
An
singular.
educated guess would be more like if if I saw like a person walk into that barn, for instance, and I was trying to, you know, like get that person's attention, like by like flinging a paper airplane or shooting a slingshot with a message, like an educated guess would be more like, well, I guess I'll shoot it here at the window. Because I imagine, it's my guess, that if I break open a window and someone's inside that freaking shed over there, they'll probably notice it and pick up the message.
Right.
But if I shoot it anywhere else, they might just think a fucking rock or a cat was outside the shed.
Right.
That's more like an educated guess.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's educated guess. I'm saying it's more predictable.
Are you guys in college?
Are we in college? Well, the college of life, I suppose. I have no. Let's go with no. We're not in college.
Yeah, no.
No, we're not in college, and neither of us has completed any college degrees yet.
I'm not about to tell you I have a PhD in theoretical physics, if that's what you're asking.
No.
Because I don't.
No. However, we have curiosity and some amount of knowledge, and
I think I have the capacity to critically think about things. I could be
you
wrong.
You do. No, you definitely
I could be
do.
wrong.
And if you want to use critical, yeah, you seem
I
to be.
think that I have the capacity to critically think about things.
Right.
But I am no PhD in theoretical physics. That's for sure.
Although you easily could, anyhow. So that begs the question: what's the difference between thinking and critically thinking? It's almost like critting. How much crit chance do you have? How much crit chance do you have before you land a critical thought?
Oh dear, you just made this take a totally different turn.
Well,
what's the difference in thinking
and critically
thinking?
I think it must be a matter of focus and momentum, honestly. Okay, let's talk about focus and momentum. That's the name of the show, and I really actually wanted to, because it kind of answers this question. Right?
You don't sound stupid. Thanks, I appreciate that.
Well, that's good. It's nice to not sound stupid.
Especially from someone who has a degree in physics, you know?
This Matt D does have a degree in physics. I have a physics degree, and you have a decent understanding. You don't sound stupid. That's good. That's excellent. I think he actually said that he had a physics degree earlier, didn't he?
Did he?
Maybe. Maybe not. At any rate, he
Well, I
sounded
thought
like
that he might be in college or have a degree as soon as he said quarks are components of.
I guess
well.
he's ascribing the same expectation to you, right?
That's fair
anyone
point.
that's talking about or answering anyone who's talking about quarks and neutrinos and stuff sort of infers that they must be relatively well educated. What's the question?
It's almost as though it's more like a statement. It's almost as though
we're mirror neurons.
If you prove to someone that you know what you're talking about, they don't care what a piece of paper says.
Right.
They know that you know what you're talking about if you prove it to them.
Right. It's like, yeah, I get that. I totally get that. So we are going to loop back around. I want to loop back around because I really want to give some more energy. Well, first of all, I want to talk about focus and momentum, but I want to give some more energy to this idea of traveling faster than light. Right? This not this idea, but this observation of galaxies moving faster than the speed of light.
Okay.
I mean, that seems to be a really obviously, if we've witnessed it happening, it can happen. And so then how and what is it? Another thing that we're talking about, which is a really interesting question to me, is we're trying to get a sort of a definition of space. In a sense, one thing that we came to earlier was that there was actually infinite space already in place when the Big Bang, if the Big Bang happened. Imagine that it didn't actually create space around it that's traveling. Space is not being created, but the space, to my mind, the space must precede any experience. Like, that's the medium in which experience, matter, etc. takes place.
So
is space itself.
We got here by thinking about the never-ending expansion of the universe and what physicists refer to as the heat death,
right,
of our universe.
Right.
And we eventually got around to the point that, it makes sense that you know, everything that we have observed in nature, in our universe, did not just happen as an event without any kind of cause or reason for it.
Right.
So it makes sense to infer that there was something that caused the Big Bang, what we
Right.
call the Big Bang.
Right.
Just because we don't know what it was doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
Right.
But if there is a way to cause the Big Bang,
Go ahead.
Someone
Go
calling?
ahead. Yeah, it's Elizabeth. Hold on just
Oh.
a second. Hello?
Hello. Did somebody lock the back door?
I don't know. Probably.
haven't.
Why?
Because I was going to bring Nani a piece of cake, but if it's already locked, I'll leave it for tomorrow.
Well, if you want to bring Nani a piece of cake, you can do that. Or one of us will run down and just open the door for you.
alright, I'll be right back. I'll do it. No worries.
Okay, I'll be on my way right now.
All right. Yeah, just leave it open then.
I thought
way.
that I left it unlocked. last
Yeah, me too. Maybe she's just calling to be sure. All right. Love you. Peace.
Probably is, because if neither one of you went to lock it, it still is unlocked then.
As far as I know, we haven't locked it, and we hardly ever do, so I don't see why it would be. But I would call to check first too. It's an intelligent move, I think, on your part to call.
Okay, so I'm coming to bring that to Nani right now.
All right, cool. Love you. I'll chat you later.
Love you, Jeff.
All right.
Bye.
Peace. Yeah, I would like to come up with a reasonable definition for space. I mean, I realize that Einstein was talking about the warping of space, etc., but I'm not really sure that what's being warped is space, because so a few tenets or elements of any accurate description of space to me must include some of these things, or at least this. It precedes whatever event takes place inside of it. All theories of the universe are just speculative, with different probabilities. As you were saying earlier, energy can create matter. So one theory is that the Big Bang was just a conversion of a large quantity of energy into the matter in the universe now. Well, that is a very interesting. I
I
like
mean, there's a reason they call it theoretical.
theoretical
physics.
physics, right? Theoretical physics, right? Well, that's always going to happen.
Science has always been our best shot. Our best
Our
guess.
best shot, which is why you kind of need that other aspect of experience, which is consciousness. And I think that once theoretical physics and consciousness, or delving a bit deeper into the influence that consciousness has on all experience, you will begin to have a real theory of everything. Like, not just a theory of everything, but you will be able to utilize an understanding of the way everything works. So my assertion here is that consciousness must precede all experience, first of all, and that consciousness actually is the substrate, is the necessary foundation for not only all experience but certainly matter. A simple way to sort of give an example of this is look around you, all this stuff. You think of a thought, right? A thought is kind of an ephemeral, transitory, invisible, non-physical kind of thing, even though it can be measured
Can
by
be
various
measured, I guess.
by various instrumentation. It can be measured, but a thought is pretty close to the invisible realm, right? It's closer. It's hard to pin down a thought than it is. I mean, you might be able to do it in the brain. Religious? No. Not. Whoops, sorry. Yeah, negative. You can type that. That's Gladgear typing for me there. Which, incidentally, Gladgear is my son. One of them. If the religion is love, and the
pursuit of truth. Okay, alright, I'll go with that.
If the religion is love and the pursuit of truth, then I am a religious fucking man.
I'm a religious man. If that's the religion, then I'm a religious
But
man.
if your religion is child abuse, telling your child that if they don't believe in what you believe in, then they're gonna burn for all eternity, suffering in an inhospitable environment, consciously aware of it, then no. I have no relationship with such barbarous ideas.
Which is another thing that we were talking about earlier, which is a really interesting thing that I haven't really thought about too much before, and that is real intelligence. So, how can any description of real intelligence not include not killing other people? Because a really intelligent entity or consciousness would recognize that they could, I'm going to use the word exploit here, but another word might be use, synergize with, gain from the experience of another person. I mean, obviously, you can't, it is an interesting, well, when you talk about religion, that's kind of, I think I'm leaning more towards the spiritual experience. I'm not talking about religious dogma. When I talk about consciousness, I'm talking about the thing bereft of religious dogma. So when I talk about consciousness and spirituality, I'm saying that you do have feelings, right? And when science, you do have feelings and consciousness and thoughts that definitely communicate an experience that is beyond the ability of science and mathematics or any kind of theoretical understanding to really explain. You can't explain an experience. You can have it, you can try to explain an experience, but I think once we start connecting more with that experience of consciousness, we will really begin to utilize the power of the forces of the universe with our minds, with
greater acuity.
With greater acuity, with our minds, without instrumentation really, or without the necessity for instrumentation.
You also cannot, by yourself, prove an experience to somebody else. It is not possible.
No. You can't prove an experience.
You can't even prove that you saw, like, you can't,
you can't even prove that you're sitting here.
That I'm sitting here with
Right.
you. Like, I can get a bunch of people in that would agree with me that I'm sitting here, but in reality, we could all be fucking tripping our minds out. Who knows?
Right.
You know? Like,
yeah.
it's just an agreed upon observation.
Which is something that leads me to believe there's no such thing as an objective experience. You can't actually have an objective experience. I understand what the word is trying to say, but you can't have an experience that doesn't include you, the subject.
Yeah. It's not
you
plausible.
can't experience anything if you're not there, and you're going to experience whatever you experience through your own lenses and your own...
Matt D, if we're in the Matrix, then I want to find the console commands and become the one. That's what I want if we're in the Matrix. Like, if it's a simulation, there are console commands. If there are encryptions, you can learn enough about computer science to break any encryption, you know? Like, it can be done. I
Right.
believe. He's beginning to believe.
He's beginning to believe.
I like this guy. I think it's kind of cool that just some guy with a physics degree just tuned in to watch us.
I know,
chill.
it's absolutely amazing. And in fact, especially since, like, when I'm not streaming League, like, I don't get anybody in my stream, right? Every now and then, like, I actually got quite a few from my Guild Wars 2 stream. But, yeah, it's really cool to be branching out into different areas. And it was certainly not expected that somebody would not only be interested in a conversation of, physics, but also pop in and start just saying, I don't know, maybe I put something in the tag, I don't know. Anyways.
You see, you don't have
really cool.
these kinds
It's really
of
cool.
interactions when there's 200,000 people in your stream.
No,
All
no,
this
no,
guy's
no.
fucking interesting input would have been wiped away with
Right.
dick pics and kappa and
Sort of, to an extent. There are different communities that definitely have a higher level of intellectual and thought-based commentary. To give you an example, the Guild Wars 2. If I'm watching a Guild Wars 2 stream, even if it's a PvP Guild Wars, which basically insinuates and sort of reveals that people that play Guild Wars 2 tend to be more intelligent, maybe generally
or
speaking,
at least are asking
or creative,
intellectual, analytical questions.
lean more towards intellectuality than people that are playing League of Legends as a very general statement. I don't think that thing's completely accurate, honestly. I don't think that this is completely accurate.
I mean, just let's all take a moment to appreciate that we live in a time where, at least in our country, I should say, we live in a time of the world where you can turn on your computer and you can say, I'm tired, it's been a long day at work, whatever, the wife is bitching at me, whatever, and you can turn on Twitch and you can say, I'm just gonna watch whatever I see here on the recommended, and you click on that, and lo and behold, you start hearing two people fucking talking about college level education from the safety and comfort of your home for practically free, so long as you have access to the internet.
It's just the internet and the various accoutrements that are connected to the internet. Yes, it is great. Let's milk this a little
fucking
bit.
appreciate
I
it.
really am glad that I'm alive in this and that I'm experiencing physicality at this time now. I'm really glad to be here. It's better than it's ever been before. Most of our infrastructure needs are provided for. We have amazing transportation that gets us. It's incredibly reliable transportation. There's so many people. This brings us back to now we have time to become an interplanetary species.
Yeah.
Because, once you're no longer, even struggling for food or struggling for shelter, once we get not fighting each other down, you have all of the time to dedicate to your highest excitement, whatever that is. If everyone on the planet was actually doing what they were passionate about, I don't care what it is. You could be a rice planter, but if you dedicate it and you could love planting rice, and if you were able to, let's say when, let's be positive here, right? When the majority of the world's population is able to dedicate itself to its highest excitement, they're gonna produce some amazing. You get better results when you're doing something you're excited in.
Once people, get to following their highest excitement without infringing upon the highest excitement of others. That's the key. Without infringing upon the highest excitement of other people, letting everyone follow their passion and learn and grow in their field and contribute their 100% to our freaking pretty much global civilization at this point.
Right.
No, not pretty much, definitely.
It's a global.
We've been everywhere on
It's
our
a global.
planet.
We definitely have a global civilization.
That's when you start fucking going and setting up moon bases and mining operations on Mars and cloud cities on Venus and fucking Dyson swarms and cold
Spheres.
fusion.
Or is there a difference between Dyson swarms? Is there a Dyson swarm or a Dyson sphere? There is a Dyson sphere, right?
Oh god, the politics.
Oh no!
God,
Oh my gosh!
politics.
Well, I'll tell you what I think about. Let's see.
Oh.
Let's just read it out and I'll offer a response. What do you think about Trump and Putin's posturing and confrontation? I'm assuming you're Democrats from what you're saying. I'm British, so Trump is interesting to observe. Well, what I think about now this is me. If you
I just
want
want
to
to
interject,
interject
you can go
before.
ahead.
I don't want to answer. I just want to say that as a human being, I do not want to place myself upon the label in any way on the political spectrum, because I feel as though the political spectrum in dealing with conservatism, liberalism, Republican, Democrat, whatever, I feel that people immediately get a grant of pure discrimination when they hear that. And
You mean they
many
sort of assume within themselves
that they know what you're thinking.
they know it, and they also have they have expectations from you based on ideological labels that they associate with whatever label it is that.
Yes.
Yes,
And when I
yes,
hear
yes.
some older people and people that I talk to talk about politics, you know, I always hear the same phrase at some point or another from them. I hear those liberals, those fucking Democrats, those Republicans, they talk about them like they aren't, like they're one consolidated group that all think the same way.
Right.
And it's exactly what racism is.
Right.
Discrimination.
Right.
So I take no position on the political spectrum of Democrat to Republican, but you can go ahead and actually answer
Well,
what
yeah.
the man is asking about.
Yeah, no, I'll take a shot at it. I think essentially it's exactly what you described it as, posturing, and that it is the kind of thing that people who are operating from a basis of fear and scarcity very readily gravitate towards. And it's also a matter of momentum. The show is focus and momentum, right? So you get somebody who's been amassing what is in their mind power over other people's lives, over their own life for a significant period of time. That's going to continue to be their focus, and focus fuels momentum. Basically, the name of the show is to describe, and I'm coming back around to answering your question, but they are byproducts. So basically, anything you focus on gains momentum via your focus, your attention. Attention equals a gathering of energy towards whatever it is you're focused upon. For both of these, or any political leader or people that have a political agenda or trying to get something done, it's kind of momentum. It's almost like a dog chasing a car. It's like it can't resist doing it because it's already become such an ingrained part of their belief system that they just do it. So I just think that they are focused on what is most important to them, and that's fine. I mean, it's not something that I'm really concerned about in my world, even if I die, because I recognize that focus and momentum is a real thing. So I can focus on Trump and Putin if I want, which aren't really, they're not really incredibly relevant players in my sphere. But I think they're both amazing, just like I think every sentient being is an amazing, lovable person that at their core, when they're aligned with that core, you can close that so that the cold air doesn't.
I'm seeing if you want to come back on.
Alright.
I don't think you're gonna lose many mice.
I don't know. I'm already losing it. I can feel it rushing in there. I can actually feel it. Yeah, I mean, I think that the source that I come from is the same source, essentially. I don't think, I'm sure. There's a commonality. We have common ground, and I think that place of common ground includes an appreciation from both of us to the other. So, you know, they're doing their thing and they're focusing on what's important to them. It's not really important to me, so it doesn't really play a big part in my life. I think they're trying, and
I feel like
it.
if one of them decides to push the red button, I'd rather not be in the States at the time. But I don't think that either of them are going to push the red button, and I think that that's the extent of the influence that they have on my life here in the States. And I think that they are just an absolute product of what desensitization can do to people. The idea that, you know, money and power is the be-all, end-all of what success is. That indoctrinated belief can really hurt people's ability to empathize, and I think that Trump and Putin are a precise example of what that societal system brings forth. Hi, boo boo. What are you doing? I'll let you out. I apologize if we seem like we're AFK for a second. I got a cat in here, and he's being rambunctious, so I'm gonna take care of him right quick.
Oh, what delightful conversation. Hey, you know what? It just occurred to me that we could probably bring you in on Discord. Or something like that. Discord works pretty well. If you'd like to join the conversation auditorially, if you would like to actually join the conversation, we have the technology to make that happen. We have Discord. It's not loaded up right now, but you are more than welcome to join in this conversation in a more real-time fashion, should you desire to do so. I can make that happen. Let's try to answer this a little bit more in depth. I think a more in-depth answer is... Okay, so... There's a more in-depth way to answer this. What do I think? I actually have almost thought to this to the point where it's become a belief. Because in my understanding, a belief is just a thought that you keep thinking. You keep thinking it, and you keep thinking it, and you keep thinking it, and eventually you come to believe that it's true. Ah, it's getting late there. Yeah, well, I understand. That happens here too. Yeah, so a belief is just the thought that you keep thinking, and there are many, many things that are true, and the experience that each of us has individually depends entirely. Now, this is the place that I'm coming from. Experientially and academically, in a sense. Regardless of what you focus on, it becomes a stronger part of your life. There are things in this life that are true that you don't want to be a part of your experience. It's true that people are killing each other and people are doing awful things to each other. But just because it's true doesn't mean that I want to include that in my experience or have more of it or participate in it. And I am coming from a place of understanding that attention to a subject creates genius with regard to that subject and brings more of the elements of that subject into your experience. So, for example, I don't really think that much about Trump and Putin's posturing or confrontation because I recognize that that's not really, it's not relevant to my experience. You might say, oh, it's not relevant. Well, what if one or the other or anybody decided to press the big red button and blew you to Kingdom Come? And I'd be like, well, I suppose, given that I've spoken the words and the question has been proffered. Hey, thanks for the follow. Appreciate that. You know, it's a possibility. But I'm coming from the place of understanding that actually you create your own reality. Let's put it, let's lay it out on the table that we all create our own reality on a real-time, moment-by-moment basis. And this is an interesting tie-in into the whole physics and science discussion, because once physicists and scientists sort of begin to even ponder the possibility, I know that there are some that do, that these things do not need to be exclusive. The idea of thoughts and the potential to create with thinking alone, I mean, obviously it's how things get created, right? You don't, this stuff, all the stuff that we see around us is the result of thinking. It might have been born of necessity of experience,
or contrast. So you sit on a cold stone or a sharp stone and you're like, hey, that's kind of poking me in the butt a little bit or in my thigh, and it's not as comfortable as the soft stone. And then you start thinking about ways to upgrade the cold stone, and you end up with a Lazy Boy recliner, right? But that Lazy Boy recliner came as a result of, well, first let's try throwing 5 or 6 or 7 pieces of wood or a flat piece of wood. Let's make a nice flat surface for my butt. Then how high off the ground should it be? So there's iteration of iteration that is born out of thought and the momentum that is created by continuing to think any particular thought or line of thoughts. Right? So I don't really... everyone else in the world is doing what they're doing, and that's cool. And those who are on, it's also vibration, right? So whatever they're doing, you literally cannot perceive, here's the statement. You cannot perceive that with which you are not vibrationally aligned. Everything is vibration. Everything that we experience in the physical world as a physical human being is vibration. It's simple to understand that the words that I'm speaking right now are vibrations. Sound is a very easy vibration to understand, especially for a physicist. And then you have sight. So we are actually just interpreters of vibration.
Yes.
Our eyes
We're
interpret.
instruments that interpret the vibration.
We're instruments. Our physical beings are just instruments that interpret vibration. But you can't perceive something that is vibrating too far outside of your frequency, right? You can't see what you can't see. You can't see what you can't see. You can't hear what you can't hear. If it's not loud enough.
If it's ultraviolet radiation and it's out of your frequency range,
it's out of your
you can't fucking see it.
Right.
You can't hear a frequency that's too high. You can't feel.
But you can actually
register.
perceive it by creating instruments, which means there are things out there.
You can raise your vibration. You can change your vibrational frequency.
You can access different vibrational frequencies, but you only can see and perceive things that you have accessed for whatever reason, which is focus and attention. That's how you access different vibrations. You give your focus and your attention, which generates momentum, to whatever you give it to, and it begins opening more doors that are of a similar vibrational frequency to that one. You begin to have access to more things that are of the same vibrational frequency. And by the same token, you begin to lose the ability to interact with frequencies that are too far outside of whatever frequency you've managed to attain. That's what I think about Trump and Putin and their posturing, and I had asked him if he wanted to join us in Discord, and that's why he's saying he's over there.
Oh, hey, he gave us a follow.
He's across the pond. He's across the pond.
Oh, he's across the pond. That means he's from Britain, right?
Right, Britain.
One of those people that named the noble gases.
He's a Brit. Right, no, it named the noble gases. Right, that's where we started out this evening.
This whole day.
The noble gases, right? And why are they called the noble gases? And boy, did that lead us.
Did that lead us to some interesting stuff?
Interesting stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
All I asked was, why are they called the noble gases? And then the next thing you know, you're talking about Trump and Putin and quantum mechanics and nuclear fusion. From just a simple fucking question that anyone, anywhere around the world could have looked at a periodic table and been like, why do we call them that? You know?
Right. Yeah. Which I thought it was really interesting that you made the distinction that they're called the noble gases because they're different than any other gases, but they're called the noble gases because they behave like the nobility for whom they were originally called the noble gases. They're aloof, they're non-interactive, etc., etc. I thought that was really interesting. Like, they're called something different because they're different, but what they're called is because they act like actual.
Yeah. So, and a cool thing in science is naming rights. So if you are the first people or person to invent or realize something like a physical law or a physical substrate or a mathematical theorem, whatever, if you are the first person to notice and publish that you noticed it or figured it out, you are allowed to say what that thing is called. You get naming rights. So the British were the first people to publicize that they noticed that all those gases on that right-hand column of the periodic table didn't interact with any other elements on the periodic table. Just like they thought the nobles of the time should be. They should not interact with any other citizenry that was out of their class. So they called them the noble gases. And I'm sorry, Matt D, but when I originally brought this up, I took a bit of a jab at you. And at not you in particular. I didn't even know you existed.
Your ancestors.
Yes.
Your noble ancestors.
And I guess mine. But
and yours, yes.
I said it's facts like that that remind me why we fought a war to get out of the control of the British.
Yeah. And then you almost sound like, in saying something like that, like, well, why do people have wars? Why do people fight? Like, why don't they divert their attention to more useful pursuits? You have a good grasp of it. Dude, you typed it, man. It's forever. You have released it to the internet now.
It's still very prominent. You're right, but it's getting better. We're becoming more and more tolerant and accepting of the fact that, like, hey, you know, maybe we could get more ethanol from the ground if we stopped bickering over who gets the fucking ethanol and, you know, started making some fucking ethanol. Or, you know, found a better way to fuel our cars besides getting ethanol. We're getting there.
We're
getting there.
It
might take a while.
Well, of course, the thing about it is, even in saying the statement "we're getting there" implies that you'll get somewhere that's done, right? So, and then of course we know that it's never done. And how boring would it be if you were like, we've solved all the world's problems?
Getting there doesn't imply that you're getting done. It just implies that you're getting to a spot that you want to, that you would think is more preferable.
An end point. That's what I'm thinking.
No, a new point.
Well,
you're getting to a new point.
Right. Well,
it doesn't mean that you're done. It just means that you get to a new point.
Well, that's different than there. There implies a specific location. It's there. We're getting there. And then once you're there, you don't need to get there anymore because you're there.
Yeah, so you're there, but like that doesn't mean that you're done. It just means that you're at a point where you're not killing each other over oil anymore.
I understand. I might have been too picky there. Yes, I understand. Getting there means we're making progress.
Yes.
Towards a more preferable experience.
Expansion of the universe.
Expansion of the universe and expansion of preference. Experience. Expansion of experience of preference. Yeah.
Wait, I think my brain just couldn't say that 3 times fast. Hang on.
Expansion of preference of expansion of experience of preference. It means
expansion
you're
of
enjoying your life.
Okay.
Expansion of experience of preference. You're enjoying more of yourself more often. Yeah. That's what that means.
I've got a cat to go make sure is being good. But I would like to thank Matt D7642 for joining us for this very first momentous episode installment of Focus and Momentum.
Focus and Momentum, right, yeah.
The talk show where we put focus and momentum
on whatever we put focus and momentum
are interested in.
Right, things that we're interested in, right. Things that we're interested in gaining more momentum. We want to fuel the momentum, more knowledge of preferable things. We want more momentum on preferable things, so we're focusing on preferable things.
And I think it's even cooler that he's from across the pond.
I know. It's actually interesting to me that the number of people, like I have a lot of people from Germany that just pop into the stream. Like when I look at my demographics,
a lot of people from Germany for some reason, and it's interesting and really, really gratifying and satisfying and cool that someone who's that far away with a completely different cultural experience, etc., can just like pop in and say, "Hi, mate. Just over here across the pond." I realize I'm talking with a sort of New Zealand or Australian
Americans aren't like good.
and I'm talking
at
about someone
British
British.
accents.
I'm pretty good, but anyways, it is definitely cool.
It's easier if you spend a lot of time around British people to sound like a British person.
In fact, I think I'd almost go so far as to say it's difficult when you're in a group of people who speak in another accent not to begin falling into
like
their
that.
right, to begin that cadence and that general.
And I mean, like, some of the things from the accents are like, of course, there's different variations of British accent, but I think some of the things actually are more fun to say than the way that we say them here in America. Like, the glottal stop. Like, I think it's fun to go glottal stop. You know,
Glottal
where you
stop.
do that little space and you're like...
What is the glottal stop? What is that?
So it's whenever you have two letters that appear side by side of the same letter, and instead of saying, you know, like we say glottal,
I've never heard the word glottal in my life.
It's
I've
just
never
used
heard
to
the word
describe
glottal.
this particular
phenomenon.
accentual phenomenon. Yes.
Okay, all right.
And you know, it's like butter. Can you pass the butter instead
Right.
of saying butter, like
Right.
you would expect
butter.
someone to say?
Butter, right? The butter, right? Or butter.
Pass the butter.
Butter.
Can you
Right.
pass the butter?
Can you pass the butter?
It's almost impossible to say it without sounding a little bit British, because if you try to say
Butter.
pass the butter, can you pass the butter? Can you pass the
Right.
butter? It's
Right.
it's hard.
You can't say it without sounding. So that's a glottal stop. A glottal stop.
Glottal.
Glottal is the word that we have come up with to define two letters occurring. It sounds like predominantly consonants occurring side by side, and one of them receiving emphasis, and the other one receiving a sort of de-emphasis.
The
In the
glottal.
glottal.
It's almost like you don't say it at
Butter.
all. It's almost like it's silent.
Right.
Glottal. Butter.
Right. There's
Butter.
definitely not a butter. But
There's not a T in
tur.
there.
It's not a but end T and start a new T tur.
I haven't heard a posh British accent. If you say posh, that's basically a confirmation that you're British. So
Yeah, if you use the word posh in any sentence, you're
if you
automatic.
use posh, sod, or if you say the phrase "Bob's your uncle," you're automatically confirmed as a British person.
Oh, and Bob's your uncle. Right. And
Bob's your uncle.
Right. Foxtrot says that a lot. Foxtrot.
You're nailing the butter.
You're nailing the butter.
Butter.
Butter. Pass the butter.
I think it's more fun to say than butter.
I think it, but you know what? I believe that it's true that
Better.
pretty much everyone has a sort of fascination with other people's accents.
Yeah, I
right?
think so too.
They
They're
think
foreign.
that. Except I'm not really all that
Not
keen
all
on
of
Russian.
them. Like,
I don't really think. I don't want to. Although I do like. No. I think.
I think
Russian,
it can be
Russian.
pretty
No,
cool in
now
its
that I
own
think about
right.
Russian, even Russian accents or any other accent, you're just like, yeah, that's not. Except German is very. It's very sort of harsh. It is. It's not like would I rather know French or speak it with a French accent, even though they're ass. Well, okay, excuse me. I don't want to say that. All right, all French people are not assholes, but they have a tendency to come off as being sort of
posh.
snob, sort of posh. I don't know. Posh doesn't mean that to me. Posh means like I actually infer posh to mean upscale, nice, posh. I want to stay in a posh place.
Yeah, it's where our accents are from, and it's more northerly, East Coast. So you hit the nail on the head. Say East Coast. That's right. You know, I grew up in Virginia,
Which interestingly
which is
enough,
kind of in the South.
yeah, it's definitely south. There's a lot of southern speaking people there, but you did not, to my ear, pick up a southern accent. No, you do not
I don't
possess
think I
a
did
southern
either.
accent. I imagine it probably has to do with the fact that you didn't grow up hearing in the household a southern accent.
Yeah. I don't think there was anyone in the house when I was growing up young, or even when I went to school that had a southern accent. You know,
Right.
everyone sounded pretty Maybe I shouldn't say normal.
Everyone sounded like they didn't have a southern accent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because my normal is you're fucking strange, you know?
Right. Yeah. So we still didn't get any closer to. Well, we got closer. There's always closer, right? But what we really want to do, first of all, I want to get more. I mean, it's just so exciting to me to know that there has been proof of anything traveling faster than the speed of light. That's
clearly, like,
that's pretty cool to me. That galaxies have been clocked with methods that are. Although I always thought, like I say, that it was obvious that something would travel faster than the speed of light because it was a measurable speed. It was determined to be finite. If you can measure something, you can exceed it.
I think that the beginning of a frontier is observing something, and then as soon as you have observed and measured something, you have the capacity to understand it well enough that you can find a way to not work around the rule, but rather you can find a way to implement the rule in such intense genius that you can make it seem as though you're breaking the rule to someone who only knows the rule and has not invested the attention to figure out how
You know what?
to
But
do
it's
that.
almost like the difference between Aristotelian or Newtonian physics and quantum mechanics, right? Newtonian physics does work and hold up to a certain point,
Until you
right?
get like to Neptune or whatever.
Until you get to quantum. I mean, quantum
and
mechanics.
retrograde and
The Newtonian view of the universe does hold up. For every action, there is an opposite and equal reaction, etc., etc. It does work.
Yeah.
For a certain level of experience, through a certain strata of experience. But so both things can be true. Both Newton things work, and he got to the idea that he was like, this is how it is, and it is how it is. But once you get to a certain point, it's not any longer how it is.
you get to a new frontier.
A new
and
frontier.
You need new physics.
You need new physics
to understand that frontier.
Right? So yeah, the speed of light has been that frontier for me for some time. And
So when I hear people say, according to our understanding of physics, I think you say that as though it gives you some grant to think that those physics understanding are gonna stay the same or something.
Right.
Like, it seems to me that you think that's gonna be the way it is 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 300 years from now, when I believe that that's incredibly short-sighted to say. Because 300 years ago, you know, we still had the idea of, whatever the fuck, it starts with an E, it's on the tip of my tongue. It's a word that they use to basically say, like, oh yeah, this is why the planets
Euclidean?
Euclidean, I think?
Yeah, Euclidean
Euclideans?
geometry. Well, the Euclidean geometry from Euclid, I'm not sure if it's actually Euclid or not, but Euclid and Euclidean geometry feels like what you're trying to get at, but I'm not sure that Euclidean geometry is actually what describes, for instance, not the parabolic, but the elliptical nature of the orbits of the planets
300 years
around the
ago,
sun.
we didn't even have a concept of retrograde and prograde. So to think that in 300 years,
Well, we kind of had a concept of that because if you watch like planets like Mercury and things, like if you actually look at
we
them
could
in the
see
night
it
sky,
happening.
you
but
can see
we didn't know why.
It looks like
we
it
had
goes
explanations
backwards.
that
Right.
didn't actually end up.
It looks like Mercury's suddenly going backwards, even though Mercury's not ever going backwards. Galaxies aren't traveling faster than the speed of light. Oh, we are traveling in opposite directions, so the apparent speed is greater. Nothing can actually. I am not. You are making the. Well, how could?
I never said galaxies travel faster than the speed of light. I said that if you calculate the change in the stretching of electromagnetic waves coming from those galaxies, it it seems in those calculations that those galaxies are moving away from us
faster
than the speed of
which
light.
actually makes perfect
Which is
sense.
apparent
It makes
reading.
perfect sense though, because if the universe is, as far as we know right now, infinitely expanding, then something that's farther out than us, that is moving in the same direction, must, in some way, shape, or form, be moving faster than us, because it's getting away from us. You're saying traveling in different directions, but there are galaxies traveling in the same direction, where one galaxy is going to be farther from the source of the Big Bang than another galaxy, which would mean that that galaxy at the leading edge, so to speak, must be in some way, shape, or form moving faster than the galaxy that's closer to the source of the Big Bang.
Yeah.
Now you're talking about the stretching of space, though, and that's a whole nother. The stretching of space can mean we are moving away faster than the speed of light, but they don't actually travel faster than the speed of light. The expansion make it seem that way. The stretching of space can mean we are moving away faster than the speed of light, but they don't actually travel faster than the speed of light.
So what he's saying is that the 2 points can appear as though they are moving away from each other faster than the speed
The
of
2
light.
points being our galaxy and the one that's farther away
Yeah,
from
but what
us
he's
moving.
saying is what I was saying earlier, that we're not traveling through space at superluminal speeds. We're on a pocket of space, and that space itself is stretching at superluminal speeds, whereas we are not traveling through space faster than light. We are not traveling at superluminal speeds through space, is what he's saying.
Which brings us to this whole concept, like you're actually insinuating that space can be stretched. And I would say, well, yes, it might seem that space can be stretched, but not really, because the only reason it would seem like space can be stretched is because whatever it is that's moving and stretching inside of space would need space to move and stretch, would need space to expand. So therefore it sounds to me not just you specifically, but people who are proposing that space can expand are just trying to say, well, basically the same thing. Well, there's got to be some place for the thing that's obviously expanding to move into, which must mean that space, which you
Hang
can't
on.
see it.
I have a question for you, Matt. D7, I assume that D is the initial of your last name. This is a question I've had about this whole expansive process of space between galaxies for a long time. Matt Dawson, thank you. I'm Jared. I don't know if my last name is. Call me Anthony. Call me Jared Anthony. Why not? But my question is, why is it that we can say, or that at least theoretical physicists seem to say, the space between galaxies is expanding, stretching faster, apparently faster than the speed of light. But why is it that space between, say, Jupiter and Neptune, or Earth and Mars, or Earth and the Sun, never seems to expand, apparently, to us? Why does space only magically start expanding once you get to the galactic scale? That's my question.
That can't be true. That can't be true. That's a good question. That
Yeah,
can't be true.
why doesn't, space between the molecules in my can of soda
Unless it's contained.
start,
Unless it's contained in like some sort of bubble.
like some kind of dark matter field?
Some kind of field that means that, almost like in Star Trek, where they talk about that's the reason for the warp drive, right? Like you were talking about before, like saying
The warp bubble?
the warp bubble, right? The thing inside of the warp bubble is encased, is protected from the actual movement that's happening on both sides. So the things inside the warp bubble would not be changed in relation to one another. That's what would be my immediate instinctive guess as to a possible reason why who knows? The Oort cloud might be that bubble, right?
Yeah, well, we've also got the heliosphere, which protects us from interstellar cosmic radiation. But I've just never seemed to understand why it seems to be that, why doesn't Barnard's star or Alpha Centauri seem to move away from the sun, apparently, at all, at any speed? Why does it seem that you have to get to the extragalactic scale?
Well, maybe the distances involved are just so small that they're hard to measure.
Space is expanding everywhere, but it is only noticeable on an intergalactic scale. But why?
Because it's so big, it's noticeable, it's a big shift. If it's very small, it's hard to detect. If the movement is very small, it's hard to see.
But even if it's very small, like...
We should be able to
feel like
measure
there'd be
it.
some kind of chaotic measurement that would be able to be done either on Earth or between stars that we have in our galaxy, or between planets.
I would imagine there
that we could be
are.
able to tell.
I imagine that we can measure.
Or maybe it is just so minuscule that it doesn't mean anything.
Well, it's measurable. It must be measurable. It just might be a very tiny, and you might also need a very sophisticated instrument.
Just like you have a gravitational attraction to your friend that you are talking to, or the chair you are sat on, but you don't notice that. You only notice it with objects like planets.
Well, I noticed the gravitational attraction between the chair that I'm sitting on and me. I definitely noticed the gravitational attraction.
Okay, so that makes sense.
Between
I can
my
see
chair.
that making sense. But then, do we have a constant? Do we have
Well, it would be the gravitational constant.
Not a gravitational constant.
An expansional
Do we have
constant.
an expansional constant that says once two massive objects or groups of objects like galaxies get far apart, you will be able to observe them as seemingly traveling apart from one another faster than the speed of light? Do we have an expansive constant that says for two things to go? He's just being semantical. But do we have a constant that tells us this is how far away two massive objects need to be?
No, I
for
could also
you
feel
to
the force between my chair and the Earth because they're all separate objects. So even though the gravity that I'm exerting on the chair is greater than the gravity the chair is exerting on me, the gravity that the Earth is exerting on both the chair and I is greater than the gravity that both the chair and I are exerting on the Earth. So I can definitely feel, because the objects are of such relative mass, my body and the body of the chair are of such relatively similar masses that I can tell the difference between my body sitting in the attraction between me and the chair and the attraction between me and the Earth. For instance, if the chair wasn't here, I would feel a very different force of attraction, which would be the Earth, but the chair is kind of buffeting the gravity of... I'm just saying that any two, obviously, there's the gravitational constant, right? So you can't say that I'm feeling the gravity of the Earth because there is gravity existing between the chair and me and
it's not
the
noticeable
Earth.
comparatively to the gravity.
The gravity of the Earth is a bit more powerful, but you
bit.
can't...
Just a little bit, it's just a trifle.
You cannot stipulate that it's impossible for me to feel the gravitational pull between the chair and myself just because the gravitational pull of the Earth is so much greater.
Well, especially if you were out in space. If you go out in space,
if you were on
that
space,
chair is going to come towards you a little bit
that chair
more,
would move towards me a little bit quicker. That's right. We'd move towards each other.
Especially if you lined your freaking, your back pockets with some big ass ores of lead just to make sure that it comes to you.
Well, lead. The chair is mostly wood.
But the thing is, I know I'm talking about you. Just so you have fucking mass.
More mass.
You need some
Right,
more,
right.
more big
You just need more
space-time,
mass.
more
Right? You
gravity.
just need more mass, right?
In space, it would take 1 million years for the chair to move 1 meter towards you.
1 million. That sounds like a calculation. Pixar, it didn't happen. 1 million years. You're just saying that. And you're like,
Well, this is the cool thing about science. Someone can tell you something,
Right.
and they don't care if you believe them or not. what you can do is you can go
can
out
prove
and
it.
you can fucking
You can
figure
prove
it out.
You can prove it.
And if you prove them wrong, you get to be like, hey,
Basically, I mean a long time, right? I figured you meant a long time, but you start talking in scientific circles.
I
A
still
long
want to
time.
know.
Go ahead.
I still want to know if there is an expansive constant.
I'm not sure that there is, but if there isn't, there should be. And if
Like, how far apart do
well,
two
we
objects
just
have to
basically
be?
figured out that the universe is expanding, right? So
Well,
now
I
you
mean,
want
humans
now
have
you
known
want
it for a while.
not
I want
that long.
Let me just talk.
Go ahead.
I want to know how far apart two massive objects need to be, two supermassive black holes, two objects that are supermassive, that are emitting light. How far away do they need to be before you can start to measure that it seems that they are traveling faster apart than the speed of light? How far away? What is that distance? What is that? How much
Tether.
distance?
It's almost like a tether.
Yeah, what is R here? How far away do two big massive bodies need to be before you can start to look at them and say, it almost seems like it's moving further away from us than the cosmological constant?
I would imagine it has to do with, it would be a variable. I mean, I know it's a variable, but it would vary with the mass of both objects and the distance.
I suppose. And the
It would
light.
vary.
It
would probably
the
vary.
luminescence.
Right, it would vary with the mass of the objects involved.
But given both masses being equal, that's how you can find the constant. So,
You'd have
if
to-
given both masses being equal, how far apart would they have to be before it seemed as though they were traveling, before it seemed to an observer on one of those supermassive objects that the other supermassive object was traveling away from them faster than the speed of light due to the expansion and stretching of space? How far away?
That's probably an unknown. It's
Is
either
it 10
known-
light years? Is it 5,000? Is it 50,000 light years? Is it a billion light years?
Or maybe there's actually a point at which those two things begin traveling faster than this. Maybe they actually are. I'm certainly not convinced that you can't travel that it's impossible to travel faster than the speed of
It
light.
depends on the theory.
It depends on the theory. Yes, that's
I
a
feel
can of
like
worms.
the thing about a constant is that once you figure it out,
Right, a constant doesn't depend on a theory. A constant is a constant. So so basically, it sounds to me like what he's saying is there isn't one yet.
There isn't one yet.
There
yes.
not one yet, right? But there is no set distance. It's just more noticeable over long distance.
That
That's-
almost
that's-
sounds
that-
like there's no reason to infer that space is expanding at all. That almost sounds like at a certain distance, light just gets so stretched out, so redshifted, that our calculation doesn't make any sense.
I didn't understand what you meant.
It almost seems to me that
Like it kind of makes sense though that the bigger a movement is, the more obvious it is to see. And that
the
it's
Hubble
always-
constant is the constant for the expansion of the universe. I know that, but how far away? Because there should be a way to figure out how far away two supermassive objects have to be before an observer from one of those supermassive objects can look at the other supermassive object and get the apparent reading that it is traveling away from it at the speed of, or faster than the speed of light, even if it's only an apparent. Right. I understand what the expansion, the Hubble constant is. I know what the Hubble constant is. That's the rate of expansion of the universe. But I'm talking about the expansive constant of how far away two supermassive objects of equal mass have to be before one observer would apparently see the other supermassive object moving away seemingly faster than the speed of light.
I guess
There should be a way.
you'd have to look more into, I guess, into the measurements themselves that are involved in measuring the apparent movement of these objects at greater than speeds of light.
these measurements that you were talking about before that.
Oh, okay. He heard me. He said, "I'm not sure," which stands to mean one of two things: either someone figured it out and I haven't heard about it, and he hasn't heard about it, and you haven't heard about it,
I certainly haven't heard about it.
or it just hasn't been figured out yet, or there's a third thing. I'm sorry, or space shouldn't be inferred to be expanding between two supermassive objects at all. It almost seems to me that it's possible that if the first two possibilities that I said are not correct,
Right.
which could be tested,
Right.
that at a certain distance, light that travels and gets stretched over a long enough distance eventually just appears to be stretched so much that if you actually measure it once on one day and once 1 week later, it'll seem as though it's not just traveling faster than the speed of light, but the farther away it gets, it would probably, you'd expect that it would seem as though it's traveling faster and faster and faster, accelerating, even though the objects might not be moving apart faster and faster at all. The light from the object might just be stretching so much that our calculation starts to make no sense. It almost seems to me like there might not be any reason to infer that space is expanding.
I do not believe in the expansion of space.
That does not make sense to me at all. I see space as a preeminent.
Hey Matt, I'm glad that you got into finance. Some people don't have that opportunity.
That you got into finance? What? There is so much I don't know. There's so much I don't know. I'm sure people know the answers. I just did a physics degree to get into finance.
Oh, really? Who does that? That's not what that is. You say that so nonchalantly, like, oh, I got a physics degree to help my finance. No, my finance to get into finance. No.
Well,
What?
I mean, no, you
What
go
do-
up
what
to
do-
a guy
what do
who's looking
finances-
for an employee who can do all kinds of crazy, cool fucking accounting and calculations, and he says, "I got a fucking degree in physics. I've got a
Right.
I've got a bachelor's in physics." You know?
Right.
It's
yeah,
like-
but who has the? I guess people that are interested in finances and numbers in general would gravitate towards.
It shows good math skills. That's exactly what I
Right.
think.
Would gravitate towards fields which require higher level mathematics, but you've almost got to have a love of physics to take.
Yeah, to get through
to-
the degree
to
that is required
go
to get a
into
degree in physics.
That's almost like a lot. You could do a lot to demonstrate good math skills without going with a degree in physics. I'm just saying that doesn't. Let's do physics for fun. Let's do physics for fun to show that we like math.
Yeah, that's what I hear a lot of physics majors say. It was painful. I really hate it.
It was painful. Oh, he's just gonna come out. I should have done something easier. Well, you know what though? Except for the fact that since you did it, hey, you've got that card now, right? You can be like,
I have a degree in physics.
I have a degree in physics, right? And even to yourself, the fact that you did it, that's pretty.
Pretty cool.
That's something to look back on and say, well, yeah. As somebody saying, what? You have a degree in physics, and you can be like, well, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that's just not something you go pick up at the corner mart.
Yeah.
You gotta have some competency, which is exactly what you're saying. You gotta be pretty competent to get a degree in physics, unless somehow or another you just manage to skate through and float. And
That doesn't happen in a physics class. I
yeah,
don't think.
it's gotta be pretty tough to skate through a physics class. I would
was
imagine.
really lucky, I guess.
Or really lucky, right? So let's see. What time did we start the stream here? I think we started about 6:30. What are we looking at? 7:59. So do we want to restart here? I don't know. And by restart, I just mean literally that. Just restart the stream. And the reason I do that is to make more bite-sized chunks to upload to my YouTube channel. Eventually, I'll get on board with some sort of editing program so I can begin editing my stream videos so that it'll be easier for me to upload them to my YouTube channel without uploading the entire stream, which is what I have been using as an editor to this point. Wow, that was an interesting sound. What was that? Alright, did our music stop for what it's worth? Nope. Alright, we'll just let that roll out, I guess. Well, that's pretty neat. And there's got to be more to it than that also, Matt. Because, you know what I'm saying? You might have wanted your degree you might have wanted to get into finance, but you didn't tune into this show and have the conversation that you've had with us this evening because you're interested in finance, right? We haven't really been talking about finance here, so yeah, it's all right. You don't have to be a closet physicist. I was just saying it might be that you got into physics, that you got your physics degree to get into finance, but I was like, you didn't tune into this conversation and have this talk about
you wanted to talk about
because
finances,
you wanted to talk
right?
about finances, right? So there's got to be something, right?
Yo, Mr. Dawson, I'd just like to thank you one more time before I go ahead and step out of the room to maybe, I hope I don't fall asleep, but we'll see. Just wanted to thank you for tuning in. I appreciate support of the small streaming base. I know my dad does too. This is stream after all. And
Your
honestly,
insights and your wisdom and your knowledge are certainly appreciated. Go ahead.
Just contribution. That's what I was gonna say. I like having dialogue, not just with anyone, but with someone who knows what they're talking about, at least to some degree.
Right. Yeah.
And it's the very first. This is a special occasion. This is the very first installment of this talk show. And
Focus and Momentum.
Focus and Momentum is the title. I'm glad that there was a reasonably intelligent individual that was prepared and here for the conversation.
Yeah, well, please do. You're always welcome. I'm doing a lot of different kinds of things. Often I'll stream League of Legends. Sometimes I'll stream Guild Wars 2. I haven't been streaming that long, but I'm trying to make sure that I have a variety of different things. I have a lot of interests and passions, so yeah.
Hey.
When you have 1 million subscribers on YouTube, I'll be the first.
Oh. The first. Well, wait a minute. How could you be the first if I already had 1 million? I'm missing something here.
Oh, he'll be the first.
You'll be the first what?
He'll be the first who ever got to fucking listen to this conversation. And
Oh yeah.
experience this show.
Oh, that's right. That's right. With regard to this
for-
particular show, right. Absolutely, I get it.
First stream podcast guest.
Yes. You will be the first stream podcast guest on Focus and Momentum. Absolutely. And a delightful guest at that. Like, actually, the kind of guest is like, oh, here's our expert. Our guest panel expert includes this evening. We could even go so far as to say, physicist Matt D is in the room because, hey,
He has a degree
if you
in
get a degree in physics, you can be called a physicist, right?
Supposedly.
Yeah, that's what it is.
At least in
So-
the legal spectrum. you
At
know.
least in a yeah. No, someone with a physics degree can be called a physicist.
Legally.
Well, legally, and there's every right to imagine.
Yeah,
that
no,
they,
you're
that
right.
They also have some,
Unofficially,
yeah.
they're probably also a physicist. You got me there.
It's nice though to have actual
And not only
expert guests on the show from time to time.
is there a finesse in physics, you can also have fun with physics. Laughing about it, we're enjoying
Oh my
ourselves.
goodness, fun with. Well, what isn't physics really? Physics.
It literally
Physics
is
is every
everything.
physical thing. I mean, physics. It seems like a.
I think it has to deal specifically with the relationship between physical things.
the relationships between physical things. Well,
But it encompasses every physical thing that exists.
right, exactly.
From sticks and stones that make fires to quantum supercomputers.
Right. To love. Oh, love and physics. Oh wait, love and physics. There's definitely a connection between love and physics.
There's a connection
Of all
between
kinds.
love.
Well, there's a love, but
everything.
yeah, actually, it might be the other way around. Like love is the fundamental force, and everything else just kind of plays on the field of love and whatever you want. Love. It's a tough word to. Yeah, it's a feeling.
Just imagine to be like a physicist that just totally disproved the theory that space is expanding faster than the speed of light.
Or that space.
That
doesn't-
space exists at all.
That space actually exists at all, or that space expands. I think I'm onto something with an expanseless space theory. I believe that
Talk
space,
about the next Einstein.
space must precede all experience, and well, not experience, because you don't need space to exist, and you can experience existence.
Well, obviously, because if the Big Bang created the space that eventually became the space out there that we all look at and love, then there must be some capacity for something without space. If the Big Bang created space, because the Big Bang had to be created
yeah, that's
by
why.
something.
Yeah, but that's why that's another reason why the idea of space expanding seems erroneous to me. Because that would be true. If there was no space before the Big Bang, then yes, that would seem to and would certainly indicate that space was created at the point of the Big Bang and in fact expands to encapsulate everything that is inside of it. But you can't. It's the chicken before the egg. You can't have something exploded into something that's not already there. And even if you try to say, oh, it's just outside of the expansion of the stuff that's expanding, it's still outside of it, so it exists.
It's like the bow shock, the bound shock.
The bow shock,
Even-
like a bow shock wave.
Yeah, like when you break the sound barrier, like it's just
Right.
on the precipice outside of the explosion. Before the explosion gets to you, you feel the air, you feel the sound, whatever.
Right.
But or there was a Big Bang, and then space expanded, and the universe expanded, and it continued to expand until there was absolutely no visible source of light anywhere aside from maybe something's own host star. And at that point, some civilization that's existed for 400 billion years figured out how to make a Big Bang. And then 13.7 billion years after that Big Bang was made, we're sitting there 13.7 billion years out the center of that Big Bang, wondering how the fuck the Big Bang came out after some other ancient physicist figured it out and made themselves a Big Bang, and now they're doing whatever the fuck they're doing, or dead. And we're sitting here, and maybe 400 billion years from now, we'll figure out how to make a Big Bang. And, we'll see. We'll see. Eventually.
Okay, guys, it's all right. Well, enjoy pleasant dreams to you. Thanks again for popping into the stream and for joining us here.
I appreciate you reminding me that neutrons also are composed of quarks. Like, I should have remembered that. But I didn't know, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. Well, pleasant dreams to you. Thanks for joining us here on Focus and Momentum, the first Focus and Momentum ever, really. Well, yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's the
now
first
I'm
one.
not. Yeah, this is the first one. This is the first one featuring Jared and Matt D, an actual physicist. You've just got to feel the love there, right? Like, what did I get a degree in physics for? So I could be. So someone would say, I know a physicist, Right?
I've spoken to physicists.
I've spoken to physicists. I know physicists. So that you can say I'm a physicist.
So I was talking to this physicist yesterday.
I was talking to this physicist. Well, let me just call up my friend. Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, it has more clout than like doctor, honestly, or like,
Yeah,
like lawyer. Like, who would you rather hang out with, physicist, the doctor, or the lawyer? Definitely the physicist.
Definitely the physicist. Oh, dude, that reminds me of a joke. Oh, that reminds me of a
I
physics
know
joke.
What it is. Oh, a physics joke.
That reminds
Okay.
me of a physics joke.
All right, a physics joke from Jared. Let's
Ah.
go. What's the physics joke?
I'm pretty sure I heard a physicist, obviously, Lawrence Cross.
Is this yours?
Yeah. I think it's he
Who?
Lawrence Cross.
Lawrence Cross.
He's got a PhD in theoretical physics, I believe. He had this lecture once upon a time, and he said, okay, so 3 people are about to be executed. They're gonna be beheaded by a guillotine, right? And they have an engineer, or no, they have a lawyer, they have a preacher, and they have a physicist, all lined up to be executed.
Right.
And so they bring up the preacher, and they say, do you have any last words? And the preacher looks up, and he says, I have faith in that the Almighty God will grant my freedom, my safekeeping, and continued life on this earth he has placed me upon. And so they put him down, and they put his head into the little stockings, whatever they're called, and the executioner comes up, and he pulls the lever, and the guillotine blade comes down, and it stops just before it gets to his neck. And the crowd goes, whoa! God saved him. You gotta let him go. God gave him life. They gave him. He gets a second chance.
Right.
So the guys let him out of the stockings, and they say, God saved you. You get to go free. You know.
Right.
And then they bring up the lawyer, and they ask the lawyer, "Do you have any last words?" The lawyer says, "Oh well, I believe that in the spirit of true justice and truth, I will be saved from this untimely, unfair demise." And so they bring the lawyer up, they put him in the stockings, the executioner comes up, pulls the lever, the blade comes down, it stops just before his neck, and the crowd goes, oh! The spirit of justice and truth saved him. You gotta let him go. You have to do it. And so they let him out of the stockings, and they bring up the physicist after he goes off into the crowd, and they're all cheering, and they ask the physicist, do you have any last words? And the physicist says, well, I don't know about any faith in God or in the spirit of justice and truth, but I do know that if you look up, there's a rope tied to the blade, and it's caught on that tiny little splinter in the guillotine's railing. And the executioner goes up and he says, oh. And so he takes the rope off, and they put the physicist in the stockings, and they pull the lever, and then the physicist realized, there's some instances where physicists just ought to keep their mouths shut.
Yeah. You just thought he would have recognized that before saying it, but apparently that's not always the case. All right, at a minimum, I'm going to go ahead and restart the stream and then take it from there. I'm not exactly sure where, but we're going to go ahead and restart and pause the stream. I'm going to take a little restroom break here and be right back after that. So, yeah, probably take about a 5-minute break or so. Suppose I can exclamation point that. Wait, B-A-C-K.